early today. It's 5:58, pretty close to the time, but we got a lot of stuff to cover today. So I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm going to try not to, talk too much because I always lose my voice. This seems to be a trend. But today's topic is talking about starting a music podcast, specifically, launching your own show based around music as, the host of my own music podcast called the Proven Knowledge Podcast, which if you follow me, you probably know this already, but if you don't, go check out the show. Every Tuesday I put out episodes. So tomorrow actually is the next episode. I got a few episodes left of 2024. I've been doing it since 2020. And if you've never heard the story of, how the podcast came to be, I kind of just started it during the pandemic when I had been laid off from one of my part-time jobs. I ended up kind of just reaching out to some of my collaborators and people I was connected with at that time, asked them if they wanted to be interviewed for a show that I had in mind. And my artist, J Trey, and I had already done a version of the show like in 2018 and 2019. It was a little bit different. So what I did was kind of rebrand it and structure it to be like artist interviews. And I've been doing it pretty much every week for the last 4 years. So, I'm excited to keep doing it moving forward. In 2025 is going to be the 5th full year. It's pretty wild that I've been doing it that long. And we're, almost at 250 episodes here coming up, which is crazy. We had the 200th episode earlier this year. And it's been a great way to, connect in a different way with the people I've already worked with, but just other people who, have a similar mindset as mine as a creative, as somebody that's pursuing a career as an artist or producer or engineer, whatever they're doing. It's great to be able to talk to people and kick ideas back and forth and more importantly, just hear their stories. And that's really why I've continued on this path of doing podcasting. And it's something I never imagined myself doing when I started music in 2016. It just kind of just fell in my lap and I've just ran with it. And hopefully I can keep doing that and see what else I can do. And it's also led me to be a guest on other people's podcasts as well, because it's kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone as somewhat of an introverted person. I never really pictured being able to, have those types of conversations with, strangers, which is crazy because, like I said, I couldn't imagine that like when I first started, because I just wouldn't be able to hold a conversation with anyone, even if we had like mutual, if we had things in common, essentially. It would still have been hard to do that, but it's really helped me in so many different ways, even just as a person on a human level, to be able to interact with people like that every week. So that's really, my background with podcasting, but that's not why we're here today. We're here today to give you guys some tips, some tricks, and just kind of a general guideline as far as how to start your own show. And this can kind of apply to any form of podcasting, like whatever topic you want to discuss, but it is centered specifically around music related topics. So what I did was find a couple articles, and the one we're going to be really focusing on today is an article by Rolling Stone, and it's called, what is it called? Find the title. It's called The Power of Music Industry Podcasting, A Guide to Success. I had to reach and look over my phone there for a second. But this article was published, I don't know if there's a date. I don't think there's a date. But this was the most comprehensive article that I found as far as kind of just breaking it down step by step on how to get started and really just kind of a blueprint for the overall vibe and the overall gist of podcasting. It says, why is podcasting an effective marketing tool in the music industry? Music industry podcasts can be a great way to increase recognition of your artists and their music, because the shows are typically focused on providing listeners with in-depth information about their favorite topics. This means that the audience is already engaged and interested in what you have to say. podcast also keeps your listeners up to date with what you're doing. So it just gives, the pretty basic, why would you even start a podcast to begin with? And I think I talked about this on the last stream or maybe the stream before about, why that's such a big thing nowadays and a big form of media that people are engaging with, podcasting being a huge thing. And it's not just in music, it's in all kinds of different fields. And 2020, around the time of the pandemic, was really when podcasting took a huge boost, not just in listenership, but in the amount of people that were starting their own shows, myself included, because people had a lot more time on their hands, and they, in that boredom or in that, longing to fill the time, they were listening to podcasts or they were making their own. I was doing a little bit of both at that time. The benefits of podcasting. The benefits include creating an online presence and networking with other musicians and music executives. In addition, podcasting can help you reach a larger audience, as most podcasts are syndicated across a variety of platforms. Finally, podcasts offer an accessible way to share your music with people who may not otherwise have access to it. So like I said about making those connections and how important that's been for me, it really depends on what your show is. If your show is just you might not be making a ton of connections, but you might have people listening that will eventually reach out to you and start that conversation. But if you have guests, and you're welcoming in new people every week, that's a great way to meet new people and just make those connections. So now we're going to get into the bullet points that I've created today. Let me see how many in total. I think we have 10 total. Yeah, we do have 10. So 10 total bullet points. I'm going to try not to be super long about it, but the first one is, who is your audience? Before you get started, one of the most important things to consider is who your intended audience is. Be sure to do some in-depth research on your target audience by interviewing some of your fans and followers, poking around inside online groups and forums to see what people are talking about, and watching trends in the industry. Find answers to the following questions and more, like, what are their demographics, age, gender, income, geographic location? What do they love inside and outside of music? What do they hate? Where do they hang out both virtually and in person? What do they love about your music? What do they love about other musicians' music? What can you offer them that they can't get anywhere else? So, this is, pretty obvious. This is really like the central point of your show, is asking, who is the intended person that's going to be consuming the episodes that you're making. So, if it is music related, I'd say even if it is just you're going to be targeting fans of music. That's really your intended audience. And if you're doing interviews with artists, for me, when I decided to interview mostly independent artists, I knew that my intended audience was going to be other independent artists. And that's primarily what I focus on as far as who I'm targeting for listenership. And I make that a big point in the beginning of the show. I say in the intro that, we interview independent artists. So hopefully it'll help another independent artist out there be able to kind of navigate their way through the industry, through hearing the other person's perspective, story, what have you. So that's kind of like the bare bones basic starting point, is like, what is the purpose of this show? Because I guess you could technically make a podcast just for you, but who's going to really listen to it? Like if your goal is to reach people and like have an effect on people in some type of a way, you got to figure that out. But I'd say any type of music related show, most likely your fans are gonna be primarily just fans of music, or if it's a specific type of music, like if it's a hip hop based podcast, maybe you're gonna be targeting fans of hip hop, or you could go even deeper. Like if it's boom bap hip hop or old school hip hop, maybe you want to focus on just the 90s era and start finding people that are, into 90s hip hop. You could make it as finite as you want. And I'd say the more specific the niche, the more success you're probably going to have in the long run. But when you're doing things like ads and even just social media posts and the hashtags and things like that, trying to promote your episodes, that's a big thing you want to keep in mind. Next up, we have, what is your why? Once you gather all that information, you'll be able to identify the marketing niche and overall goals for the show, which is basically what I just said. So it's a good segue, I think. It could be something obvious, generating leads and new fans. It could be primarily to boost your name recognition in the industry. Or it could be a little less obvious to the public, such as using the platform to become an innovative leader in your part of the music world. Or it could be part of your strategy to boost your knowledge and skills as a lifelong learner as you interview others for your show. It could even be to make a statement about something important to you. Or it could be a combination of all these things or other reasons. And for me, with my show, it is kind of a combination of everything because I'm a fan of music, so that's the first thing. Before I even started making music, I was a fan of music. I create music, so I'm an independent artist, producer. I've been doing music for 8 years, so I have that in the repertoire. I'm a fan of, helping people and helping, like I said earlier, other independent artists. And I also like giving opportunities to the guests to get to be able to tell their story and, reach a new audience and a new demographic. So it's really like all those things combined. That's my why. Most importantly, I'd say, is just the giving back aspect, because you can affect so many people through conversation, and you can go so much deeper than just the music itself in the conversations. And you just learn so much about these people and these artists and what kind of makes them who they are, which is awesome. So that's really the why, and just making sure that you have one. And that's for everything you do in life. But, as far as podcasting goes, you kind of got to have a reason for it to be able to have any type of longevity or just be able to get people's attention. Next up is choose your format. Most shows have some consistency, so listeners know what to expect. Is your show all interviews, or all music, or a combination? What will you share and how? You might consider the format of other popular musician and music industry podcasts and see what you want to emulate and how you can be remarkably different. Key consideration is how long you think the show will be most of the time, and how that affects your publishing schedule. Is it a kind of quick bits or quick bites show, maybe 10 to 12 minutes, that you'll publish more often, or a longer weekly podcast, 30 minutes to an hour or more? When you launch, you'll want to have several episodes lined up in the pipeline so people can binge if they want to. Then after a couple weeks with more aggressive publishing schedule, you can shift into the schedule you're planning to maintain. So my schedule, I always had it in mind to do it every week. And, I know for some people that's not realistic. For me, it's hard. But what I do is I record 4 to 5 weeks in advance. So I'll record an episode, and then I'll put it out about a month, maybe a month and a half later. And by doing that, it allows me time to be able to do the editing, to be able to do the scheduling, and make sure I have an episode coming out every week based on the schedule. And like I said, the day I picked was Tuesdays. Don't really know why I landed on Tuesdays. I just thought it was a good day during the kind of midweek to release an episode. But I made sure to stay consistent with that. It's always been Tuesdays, so everybody who is a fan or a listener of the show, they know every Tuesday is when the show drops. So I'm not dropping like Friday this week, Saturday this week, Wednesday this week. It's always Tuesday. It's consistently always on a Tuesday. And as far as the length of the episodes, when I started out, I didn't really have a length limit. I was doing episodes that were like an hour. I think the longest one I have is like an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. But the more I've done it, with time constraints, with my own schedule and the other person trying to respect their time as well, I aim for that 20 to 30 minute range now. I'm not trying to do super long episodes. We'll occasionally have like a 45 minute episode if the conversation's really in depth. But overall, I structure the questions to be able to say like, yeah, we want to get this done in like 25 to 30 minutes is kind of the goal. So if you look at the run times on most of my episodes, they're within that range. Like I said, there's a few exceptions, but that just comes with having natural conversations. So these are all things to keep in mind when you start out. And I think it's better to have those things pinned down before you kind of get it going, which is kind of what this is saying. Like you can kind of test some things out to see what works. But create something that is pretty uniform and works for you, so you're not going insane trying to figure out like what is the schedule going to be and what is the format going to be week to week. Because if you have it more uniform, I think it's just going to be better in the long run. Next up is picking a name for your show. With all that information, selecting a name is next. Apple suggests a clear, concise name that is relevant to what people search for. Make sure it expresses your brand identity and is memorable. So my podcast, the name itself, doesn't necessarily show that it's a music podcast, but that's because the Proven Knowledge name came from the brand that Jay Trey and I created. So it was always called the Proven Knowledge Podcast. I just took the name and just kind of centered it around doing the interviews, but it was always a music-related thing. But if you stumbled upon my show, you probably wouldn't know based on the name that it was a music show. So my name might not be the best example to go for with that, but I do have it categorized under music interviews. So if people were to find it, they would find it in that category. And then if they saw that, they would know like, oh, this is a music-related show. But if you're trying to make a name that is distinct for like we said, your niche or whatever you're trying to do or tell, you should probably come up with a name that is relevant to that. Like you don't want a name of a food podcast if you're talking about music, unless it's directly related to, like, if you're making a food and a music thing, like you got to get creative with the name so people kind of know what it is. But I'd be willing to say the name might even come before all that other stuff, because that's what happened for me. I had the name way before the actual like specific details kind of got ironed out. So yeah, it's whatever it is for you. If the name comes first, so be it. But pick a name that is original and just a name that makes sense for your show, and that should be a pretty easy part, honestly. Plan the content. Decide on the content for each episode. You might want to focus on one artist or genre, or you might want to interview different musicians and industry professionals each week. Will you include music in each episode? How much? You should also consider whether there are any recurring segments. For example, a musician of the week, or a segment that focuses on a particular topic. So for me, the questions that I ask are somewhat uniform, but I kind of edit and tailor them to each guest specifically. Sometimes I change it up and add in a new question or experiment with some type of question that I had in mind for the week. But for the most part, those are pretty uniform. The way the episodes are structured, I have an intro. I have an official podcast intro. At first, I started out with just the intro. Now I technically have two intros. There's the official podcast intro, which I put in last year. Then there's the intro itself, which is the intro to the episode, explaining like who the guest is. Then there's the episode. Midway through the episode, there's the mid-roll, which for me is a support the podcast mid-roll ad, which is basically just me telling people, you can donate to the podcast at this link, blah, blah, blah. Then it gets back into the second half of the episode. And then it's the outro, which is saying thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Take care. That's it. That's the structure of every episode I've done pretty much so far. Like I said, outside of that official intro, which has only been going on for like a year and a half. But that's the structure. And I know like each episode is going to get structured like that. And that's how I do it. So you kind of got to pick like, what are you going to do with that? And there's music included too. Because I produce, I use my own tracks. So I have all the rights to those tracks and it's great. If you don't make music, if you're just a fan of music and you don't have the luxury of using your own stuff, look at royalty-free websites. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of one, but I know there's a lot of websites where you can go and get royalty-free music to use. You could ask a friend, if you're a friend of a musician, if you could license their stuff. Go to BeatStars, license some beats from a producer. There's all kinds of options you could do to get cool music for your shows. I use different music in every episode pretty much, but like I said, I have thousands of beats, so I just use my own stuff. You could license technically one song and use that for every episode if you wanted to. So that's that. Prepare to record. Finally, once you've identified your content and format, it's time to start recording. You'll need the right equipment, software, and processes for recording the audio. Creating high quality content is essential if you want people to come back each week. So when I started, I had a set of lavalier mics. They weren't even wireless. They were like two lavaliers tied together. I bought from Amazon. It was like a USB thing. And I would just plug it into my laptop. I would kind of hook one end to the bottom of the phone, and I would hold the other end, or pin the other end up near my mouth so I could talk into the one end, have the other person talking to the other end. And then I eventually upgraded my gear a little bit. I got a Yeti mic, which is much better audio quality. I've always used FL Studio for editing the podcast, but I just record into my laptop's microphone, like the built-in microphone. You can record all kinds of different ways. It really doesn't matter. It just kind of depends on like what kind of levels do you want to have everything. I've never been super picky about my audio editing or even the quality for that matter. It just, however in-depth you want to get. If you want like super high quality stuff, go out and get an expensive mic or expensive interface, whatever you want to do. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, you don't have to, you shouldn't do that if you don't want to. Like, if you want to achieve a certain level of quality, go ahead. I've just never cared that much because the podcasting thing is just a thing I do because I enjoy it at the end of the day. It's not really a huge thing for me as long as people can understand the conversations and the audio's clear. I feel good about, just piecing everything together. So basically I just use my laptop, microphone, and I use my phone to do the interviews, but you could do them in person. It doesn't matter. It's just whatever you want to do. But that's pretty much my setup, but setups can kind of vary, and you can Google or even watch other YouTube videos about 2025, 2024 podcasting starter kit or whatever, and you can get affordable interfaces and microphones to just start your own podcast. Plenty of stuff out there. And that brings us to the tools you'll need, which kind of gives a list of things that you should need. It says for improved sound quality, top quality microphone. So like I said, I use the Yeti, which is a very popular microphone for gaming specifically, but it is also pretty good for podcasting. It's the Blue Yeti. I have the black one because I think it looks cool. The silver one's like the original, but I'd recommend the Yeti. It's nice for what it is. You're just having conversations. Audio interface. I don't use an audio interface for podcasting because, like I said, I'm plugging directly the USB into my laptop and just recording via the microphone that's already built in. But if you want to have an interface, you want to set up multiple mics, go ahead. I do have an interface, but it's not for that. I have an M Audio interface for music recording. So a little bit different, but you can use something like that to do this. White screen or pop filter. I don't use a pop filter either for that. Essentially, a pop filter is, you probably know, but you put it in front of a microphone and it gets rid of all the harsh sounds in vocal tones, kind of cuts those out. So like P's or S's, things like that would kind of give poor feedback in the microphone, gets rid of those things, cuts those out. So that can help. I've never used one though for podcasting. So, that's all preference. Studio quality headphones. I do use headphones to hear the live audio of my show. I use Audio-Technica headphones. I would highly recommend Audio-Technica. They are great for, leveling out the audio pretty well, kind of making everything, the treble, the bass, the mids, everything's pretty even, which is nice. Nothing is kind of outweighing the other. I would recommend something like that, so you're getting the true playback of what is actually being recorded. Recording software like Audacity, Skype, or Zoom. So I do all my interviews, well, not all my interviews, but a lot of my interviews via Zoom, which I just have the free account, so I can only do like 45 minutes on mine. But like I said, my show is 20 to 30 minutes, so I can get away with that. If you're doing like 2-hour long podcasts though, maybe you're gonna want to get that paid version. I'm not really sure about Audacity and Skype, what their terms are, but I'm sure you can get either one of those for relatively cheap if they have a paid version. But I also do FaceTime interviews too, or you can just call somebody up on the phone. If you're not a video podcast, you can just call somebody up and record their conversation from their end of the phone. Whatever you want to do. Podcast editing software like Adobe Audition, GarageBand, or Audacity. Like I said, I use FL Studio because I'm a producer, so I just use my normal audio software. So whatever you feel is necessary for that, and if you have experience in audio, chances are you already know how to use that, one of those, whichever one you have. And then there's hosting sites like Buzzsprout or Libsyn that will help you get listed on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. I've never heard of either one of those. The one I use is called Spotify for Podcasters, which has actually just been renamed again to Spotify for Creators. The same thing. Good for them. They rebranded again. They used to be called Anchor FM. And I like them because the process is relatively easy to upload. I can upload the podcast from my phone, and I can put in the metadata, schedule the episodes, upload the artwork. I can do it all from mobile. I can do it from computer, desktop too, but I like being able to do it from my phone on the go whenever I want. And it's completely free. I don't pay anything for that service. So I don't know how other distributors work, but Spotify for Creators is free. The only downside is that they kind of changed it, but I think this is industry standard at this point because of how many podcasters there are now. You have to reach a certain amount of listenership per month to access, being able to make revenue from it. When I first started out, I was making 1 cent per episode, or per stream actually, not even per episode, which is actually a lot more than you make on your music. So I was doing okay there for the first couple years, but then they changed it to, you got to have a certain amount of listenership to access being able to monetize your stuff. But if you don't care about monetizing your podcast, or if you have another way of doing it, which I do now, then it won't be a big deal. Like I said, you don't pay anything and you can upload as many episodes as you want. So that's the one I would recommend. But, and I'm actually putting a link in the description of another article by Spotify for Podcasters to show you guys like a little bit more tips and tricks on that whole thing. And it has some specific things for their platform as well. What else do we have here? Next up is publishing your first episode. You may want to do a practice episode with a friend so you can see what feels right as you speak and what doesn't work for you. You don't want to find yourself rambling or you will lose listeners. Once you feel comfortable with the format, write out an outline for your show or at least jot down some bullet points you plan to talk about. Then, recording from a place that doesn't have a lot of extraneous noise. Record your first episode. If you and one or two other hosts are all on the show regularly, it's possible your natural interactions will be a part of the fan appeal, so strictly adhering to the outline will sometimes be unnecessary. Just decide in advance that's the direction you want to go. Edit your audio file to take out pauses and anything else that is distracting. I actually don't think I did a practice episode. I think I just kind of did the interview. First interview, it was with an artist named Jessica Jones. And I remember being super nervous about it for sure. But I just kind of did it, and the more I kept doing it each week, it got to feel more natural. But yeah, I mean, depending on the format of your show, I would probably do a practice one just to kind of get the feel of it, because it is kind of a weird feeling, unless you're a super extroverted person and you're used to just talking all the time. But yeah, like I said about creating a format, that will keep you from rambling if you have somewhat of a guideline. And the guideline doesn't, like this says, the guideline doesn't have to be that strict. You can go off the script a little bit, because you want to inject your personality. You want to be human. You don't want to be just a robot reading on a script every 10 seconds. You want to have your own emotions shine through, because that is what the people are going to hear, and that's what they're going to feel when they're listening to your episode. And that goes for your co-hosts as well if you have them. I've always just done it myself, at least as far as doing the show the last 4 years. So that's just a case-by-case basis, basically. But I agree with this article. I think doing a test run would be the way to go, just to see if it feels good, and then kind of go back to the drawing board and fix some things or adjust some things if you want. So yeah, podcast artwork and music. Feeling good about the show now? Great. Now it's time to move forward with getting an artistic thumbnail and a memorable intro with music, of course, that reflect your show's name, style, and brand that you want listeners to relate to. Remember, the future listeners will see your artwork before they'll hear a single episode. Apple's requirements are: must be original, must contain your logo and show name, size 3000 by 3000 pixels, file type JPEG or PNG. So I've underwent a couple different versions of the episode artwork. The official show artwork has only had, I think, 2 different versions. It features the official Proven Knowledge logo, which was done by Dapper Graphics. My buddy Dan, who lives in Delaware still, or somewhere on the East Coast, Boston. Forget where it was, but I connected with Dan way before I made music. He made that logo for us in 2018. But I added the words "the" and "podcast" to the current existing logo, and I use the same font. It's a Canva font. I forget what it's called. I think it's called Toy Box, something like that. But I've always used the same font for all of the podcast stuff. But originally I just had a picture of the artist, and it would say the Proven Knowledge Podcast in the middle. It would have the episode number and the name of the guest at the bottom. This past year, I kind of switched it up a little bit. Now I feature 4 photos of the artist, producer, whoever the guest is. And then at the bottom left corner, it has the Proven Knowledge Podcast. Off to the side, episode whatever, with the guest name. So it's the same type of font and everything, but it looks a little different. And I think that's a cool thing to do, kind of change it up every once in a while. But you want to make it pretty uniform. And just so when people see it, they know oh, that's this show, because I recognize how it looks visually. And yeah, just follow those guidelines, whatever, what have you. That shouldn't be too hard. Ways to market your podcast, and this is the final step right here. It says create build up for the launch of your podcast show by using all your channels, gigs, social media, email list, influencers, private and professional networks. Invite people to a launch party, either in person or virtually. Make a big deal about it and offer gifts for people who come. Some ongoing personal and content marketing strategies to consider. Ask friends and family to share it. Invite people who listen to your music already to listen to your episode. Post episodes on social media. Send out episode links to your email list. And then it has a lot of other ones. I'm not going to read every single one. You can read it when you read the article on the YouTube replay. But essentially what it's saying is, find unique ways to push your podcast to your audience. I've always done social media posts. Like I said, every Tuesday is when the episodes come out. So I'm posting every Tuesday around noon, telling people, here's where you can find the episode, give a big description of what did we talk about this week? Who is this guest? Why do you want to check it out? Kind of just pique their interest, give the description. And yeah, you can experiment with whatever you want to do. If you want to do paid ads, I don't do paid ads for mine. But if you're trying to, keep growing your audience, maybe that's something you want to do as well. There's a bunch of different ones. Call to action, the email list, which I have an email list for my music stuff. I don't have one for the podcast. But if you want to send people emails every week and tell them, here's the new episode, you can check it out. If they don't have social media, chances are they have an email where you can send them, like I said, every single week, and they'll be able to hear the episodes. So that is pretty much that. That is pretty much the 10-step guide to getting started. We went a little over a half an hour with this. That's why I started early. I figured it would take a while. But those are 10 great steps, in my opinion, as someone that has done podcasting now for almost 5 years. That is a great list to say, here's how you can kind of get the ball rolling. And then where you take it from there is up to you, because like I said, I never imagined I would be doing podcasting at all, let alone going on 5 years of doing it and doing it every single week and talking to hundreds of people. So like I said, I'm going to leave that link in the description of the YouTube replay. And I'm also going to leave this one by Spotify for Podcasters. And this article is called How to Start a Podcast, the Creator's Step-by-Step Guide. And this actually just came out a few days ago. It's a brand new article. And it goes over similar things that we just talked about. There's a video in there you can watch, but there's a lot more. It has a lot of stuff specifically for the Spotify platform, but a lot of it can apply to anywhere that you're going to be doing a podcast. And that goes super in depth. There's a ton of stuff in this article. So definitely check that one out as well. But check out that Rolling Stone one, because that's the one I just broke down for you. But yeah, I wanted to discuss this because, podcasting is a really cool thing to do. And it's something that has helped, trying to think of the word. It's helped me in my journey as a musician and as a human being. And it's been super cool. It's a real blessing to be able to have a show and have a voice. And I think we need to use our voices more for the right reasons and to help people. And once you have that why, you're going to be able to do awesome things. And hopefully this inspires you to take that first step to making your own show. But like I said, be sure to check out the Proven Knowledge Podcast. Every single week, put out episodes. I'll be taking a little bit of a break here at the end of the year. I take 1 week off a year, but other than that, I'm dropping every week. And if you have a show that you end up launching because you watched this video, let me know in the comments of the YouTube replay. I would love to know. Hopefully I helped spark something in you to be like, yeah, I want to make a show now. But yeah, that was pretty much starting a music podcast. So we're going to be back next Monday. It's going to be another Monday next week, November 25th. We're going to be discussing sleep schedules as a musician. This will be another very interesting topic to discuss. as, musicians. I can talk, guys, I swear. It's been a long week. A lot of things happened this week, but as musicians and creatives, we have some of the weirdest sleep schedules out of anybody, out of any, field. So it's going to be kind of cool to research that and discuss that a little bit. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. And like I said, click those links down below, the YouTube replay, watch them, and hopefully you can get your own podcast going soon, and I'll be on the lookout. But until next week, thank you guys for tuning in. See you then. Peace out and have a great week.